glad you are with us on the Retirement Revolution. Brad Johansson with Rob Guy, Tax and Investment Advisors. Nice to see you, my friend. How are you?
Thank you, Brad. I'm very well. How are you today?
I am good. Let's get into trying to make retirement a little bit easier because it becomes so complicated for so many people. We look at things one way. We're told to look at things one way. Maybe let's give people a breadth of knowledge, maybe a new view. You talk about a new way of managing wealth. That seems like a very broad topic, but give me an idea on what you're looking at and what may be a new way of managing.
Okay. Brad, I really think that it's important for people to really have a perspective about how much money they have that's actually theirs to be able to spend and how much money they're just holding on to for the IRS.
So you're saying our number isn't our number.
That's right. You have a joint account with the IRS, and when you get your Fidelity or Vanguard statement, it doesn't say Uncle Sam owns half this account and you own half this account. It says you own it all, but you don't, because if you have $100,000 you need to take out to pay for a truck or something you want to buy, you're going to have to pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in taxes, right? So not all that money's yours. It would be nice if your Fidelity statement that said, here's your $600,000 and here's the $400,000 you're holding on to for the IRS, but they don't tell you that. So here's what happens. When we're talking about these Roth conversions, for example, people say, I don't want to pay that tax. And I say, I know. Nobody wants to pay the tax. But everybody's going to have to pay that tax. But would it make you feel any better if I were to show you're in just as good a position after you've paid those taxes, if not much better? Here's what I mean by that. Let's have a new way of measuring wealth. Wealth, to me, is purchasing power. It's not the money you have just to look at and have it look nice on a statement. What can you and your family actually spend with that money? So let me give you an example.
Okay.
Let's say you have $100,000 in your IRA and you were contemplating doing a Roth conversion. And at that time, let's just say, for example, you paid $25,000 in taxes. Now you have $75,000 in your Roth IRA. It would appear at first you're $25,000 worse off. But the reality is all you did was you paid off IRS the money you already owe them. And the sooner you pay it off, the less you're going to have to pay them over your lifetime. And in fact, if I have 100,000 or 80,000 in my Roth and you have 100,000 or whatever number is in your IRA, you still have to calculate what the taxes might be in the future on that, because you don't know what the rate is going to be in 5 or 10 years. I know the rate on my Roth is going to be 0. I know the rate my kids are going to pay on the Roth is going to be 0. But if you think short term and say, gee, I had 100 grand in my account, I don't want it to only be 75,000. Let's reevaluate the way you think about wealth. Let's not count the IRS's money. Let's not count the debt to the IRS as part of your portfolio.
See, I think what you're telling me is probably what we've heard all along. Maybe what we've been taught to understand. Look, the government set this up for us, right?
Yep.
The 401k plan that came back when we turned it over in the Revenue Act of 78, we kind of move it over and go, you know what, we're going to give you a break.
Right.
Let's defer all of this stuff. Let's kick the can down the road.
Yep.
So we've been trained for decades. Wait.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about it now. And because we're in a procrastination mode, we say, all right, you can turn your money over to a Roth.
Yeah.
I'd like to hold on to mine right now because I really don't know what's going to happen. And as you talked about, I know the rules right now.
That's right.
I also know the rules are going to change. What's advantageous about doing it right now in the marginal tax bracket that we're sitting in at this moment?
Right. So you have a unique opportunity because the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to expire at the end of 2025 unless it is extended. We don't know if it will be or not, or some version of it. But going with the rules that we know now, the tax rates are going to change. They're going to revert back to what they were in 2017. They'll put some inflation adjustments on there, but not much. So here's something that a lot of people don't understand is that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act created a very large window of opportunity to be able to pull money out of your Roth IRA and still keep it in a relatively low tax bracket. You can get a couple $100,000 in income and still not be going up into the higher brackets. That changes considerably in 2026, where if you decided you're going to do a Roth conversion, you're going to be able to convert maybe 20 or 30% less for the same money in taxes. So it's really going to be costly to wait. It doesn't mean you shouldn't, but if you can get a big one in 2025, I would do that. And you still do strategic conversions going forward at the higher tax rates. But why not take advantage of it? If you can save, many thousands of dollars in taxes now just by utilizing the laws that are on the books, that makes sense. And the longer you wait, the bigger the problem.
That marginal tax rate sitting now at about 37%. Give us perspective on where it was, because a lot of the boomers probably don't even remember that because it was their parents or their grandparents who were dealing with this marginal tax rate back in the 70s.
That's true. So marginal tax rates have had a wild history. Back after World War II, we actually had tax rates that are at 90%.
Crazy.
And throughout history, we've had them, in the 90s and the 70s on a fairly regular basis. Tax Reform Act in the 80s actually started dropping it a little bit. And right now, we have the lowest marginal tax bracket ever. So one of the things that you want to be taking advantage of is the current low tax brackets, because we know that they could be going up. Now, one of the things people say, this is a little bit of a side note, but people say the debt isn't a problem because debt relative to GDP, gross domestic product, the percentage isn't that bad. Well, right now, debt to GDP is as high as it was at the end of World War II.
Scary.
Very scary. And that's when all the tax rates had to really start going up to pay the bills. And that's a situation we could be in now. So there's a perfect geopolitical, demographic, and economic perfect storm that's all colliding at the same time right now, Brad, to make this maybe the most difficult time and confusing time to retire in my 35 years of doing this.
Okay, we talk about the tax time bomb all the time, which is why you created BostonTaxTest.com. Explain what this calculator does. And unfortunately, it's not a pretty picture when people pop on this, but you kind of need to know because ignorance doesn't really count. The government doesn't care whether you don't know.
That's so true. Yeah, we have put together the BostonTaxTest.com, where you can go and you can put in your own numbers and find out what your debt to the IRS is. Do you want to know how much of your IRA, 401k, or 403b is actually yours and how much of it is actually a debt to the IRS? Well, we can run those numbers for you and we can tell you how much is yours, how much is a debt to the IRS, and how we can minimize that debt to the IRS. Because as much as you owe them right now, you're going to owe them more and more and more and more and more as time goes on. And you know what the best way to get out of a bad partnership is? You buy them out. So why don't you buy out Uncle Sam today at today's known low rates instead of procrastinating and ending up having to pay a lot more taxes in retirement.
BostonTaxTest.com. You can go to the website. You can scan the QR code that is on your screen. When your eyes are opened on what you may owe and the strategies that Rob was talking about, how you can pay less, you may want to make the phone call to 855-255-1128 and get a retirement freedom roadmap. It is complimentary, and a copy of his book that has all of these strategies, Retire Free. He's still working on updating those because our times change. The strategies need to change. You need to have a roadmap to adjust to those changes. The Retirement Freedom Roadmap is free. It's yours for calling 855-255-1128. Scan the QR code. Let's get you into the office, put together a retirement plan. Where do your assets need to be? We'll talk about asset location and maybe relocation when we return.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
Glad you're with us on the Retirement Revolution. Brad Johansson with Rob Guy, Tax and Investment Advisors. We're talking about re-understanding, re-looking at remanaging your wealth. And that means, well, maybe I don't have it all in the right place. I said that we're going to talk about asset location or asset relocation. There's a difference between accumulation, you say all the time, and distribution phase, which is why many people may be with the wrong advisors who are no longer talking about how to distribute because it's all been about accumulation. Tell me about what you're worried about with asset location and asset relocation right now.
Brad, asset location is one of the most important factors of your financial plan, particularly where it can help you is saving taxes. And we are tax and investment advisors, so a lot of times taxes is what we're focused on for people with higher net worths. One of the things I see a lot of times is that they don't have their money sitting in the right bucket. Let me explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
By this, I'm talking about the tax buckets. There's really only 3 tax buckets your money can be sitting in. There's the taxable bucket. That might be an individual account, a joint account, a trust account. There's no special tax benefits to that account. If it pays interest or a dividend or a capital gain, you get a 1099 every year. It's currently taxable. Meter's always running. That's your taxable account. Then you have your tax deferred account. That's where you put money in pre-tax, you got a tax deduction, and it grew on a tax deferred basis.
Yeah.
Then you have your tax-free account, and traditionally that would be a Roth IRA. Not that many people that I run into have Roth IRAs because they've just become popular recently, but those are the 3 buckets, the taxable, tax deferred, and tax-free. Now here's the issue. Let's say you have a portfolio that has some stocks and some bonds and some cash. Okay. And let's say you have a 60-40 portfolio, you've decided that's what you want. Just about every person who comes in who's with another advisor who I see, if they have a 60-40 portfolio, they have 60-40 in the IRA and 60-40 in the joint account and 60-40 in the trust account. It's all evenly spread out.
Because that's what we've been told to do.
And it's what you're told to do, and that's what's easy to do, and no problem. But it's the very inefficient way to do that. And the reason for that is certain assets are taxed in different ways. If you have money in that taxable bucket, I would make the argument that that's the money that should be the stock part of your portion, a portion of your portfolio. Why is that? Stocks get special tax treatment, don't they?
Yeah.
You have capital gains and you have qualified dividends, which qualify for either a 0 or a 15% tax bracket for most people under the current rules, okay? So that money is also going to get something called a step up in basis when you pass away. So let's say your Apple stock is worth 500 grand. By the time you pass away, you paid 50 grand for it. Well, when your kids inherit it, they pay no capital gains tax on that. Flip the script. All the money that's in an IRA or a tax-deferred retirement account, that's all coming out as ordinary income, regardless if it's a stock or a qualified dividend or a bond or anything else. Ordinary income is generally taxed at a much higher rate than capital gains and qualified distributions. So why wouldn't we set your account up so that the tax-efficient assets are in the inefficient tax bucket so we can overcome that? And then the money that is in the tax-deferred account, that's all coming out as ordinary income. And the bond portion of our 60-40 portfolio was going to be ordinary income anyway, so we haven't changed anything there. Let me tell you, Brad, I run analysis for people all the time like this, and we use asset location, and we run out their tax bills over the course of their lifetime, utilizing efficient location versus inefficient location. The difference can be tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax savings from having your money in the right spot. You know how many brokers, advisors, and other people are talking about this to people? Virtually none.
Is it because we've been told the same thing all the time? And look, we're resistant to change anyway.
Right.
And times are changing right now, and so we feel more uncomfortable with it. Some of the old rules, you've talked about the 4% rule, no longer works.
Right.
You got to readjust. 60-40. Well, everybody does that.
Right.
Do I have to readjust this right now? And maybe even understanding where your money is. You're saying a lot of people are even in with advisors who tell them that they're in a plan that everybody else is in. They talk about their risk tolerance, and they find out that it's not even a 60-40 plan. It may be something because they haven't asked the question.
They haven't asked the question. You know, getting the right answers starts with asking the right questions. And oftentimes, I find many of the advisors or brokers out there, they're just focused on the investment. People don't have a financial plan.
Let's accumulate.
They have a portfolio. That's it.
Yeah.
That's only 1/5 of an effective plan. And you're really not going to have the optimum retirement that you're capable of and that you certainly deserve by following the same cookie cutter advice that tens of thousands of other people are getting, because they can't give you individualized service. That's why I offer a boutique situation, a boutique type of office for a limited number of higher net worth people who have higher balances in their retirement plans. They're trying to figure out how they can minimize those taxes and set themselves up in the best position possible.
You talk about this in your book, Retire Free, but there are 5 things within that plan. And you talk about the boutique and individual, but there's 5 things that have to be within that very quickly before we go to break. And then tell people about the roadmap. The 5 things that they have to have going into this plan, especially during volatile times when the rules that we always went by shouldn't be the rules anymore. Please share.
So we want to make sure that, first of all, we have a comprehensive plan and that we're looking at how each piece of the plan talks with one another and interacts with one another. Beginning with the income plan. The Retirement Freedom Income Plan is the first step to make sure you're never going to run out of money, because as we've discussed, that's everybody's biggest fear. So I have people with 500,000, people with 5 million. They're both worried about running out of money. It doesn't necessarily matter how much money you have, okay? We want to make sure you're never going to run out of money, so you're going to be able to relax and enjoy your retirement and not look at the meter and say, am I running out here? You know, you start to get a little later in life and you're watching the balances go down and you're like, oh my goodness, right? So you want to make sure your plan is going to be solid. And again, those lifeboat drills that we like to run, whether the market crashes, whether interest rates go up, inflation takes off, one of you dies prematurely, whatever it is, are you and your family going to be okay? That's what people want to know. Am I going to be okay? So the income plan starts there.
Then you deal with investments?
Then we deal with investments, because one of the biggest risks that people face in retirement is that sequence of return risk. It doesn't matter, Brad, what the market does over 100 years. It matters what it does over the next 5 or 10 if you're getting ready for retirement. And what we do know is that over 100 years, the market works out, but not over every 10-year period. So what will you do if you happen to be unlucky enough to retire at the beginning of a tough time? I mean, if you retired in 2000, you probably went back to work. But, you know, if you retired in 2009, you're rich. Luck of the draw. Are you feeling lucky? You know, you could make a pretty argument right now. Things are seeming very overvalued, highly volatile, a lot of room on the downside. Market's gone up 5-6-fold since the last low market that we had. I would argue to people, look, we've had a really great run. Why not take some of the chips off the table? Not all of them, but if you sit at the, you know, it's like we've all been sitting at the blackjack table for 15 years, winning. We got black chips up to here.
When are you going to walk away?
Bring them some to the window, because if you sit at that table long enough, what happens? The house wins them all back.
They always do.
Right?
And you include then taxes and medical expenses and legacy plan to make sure that that plan all fits together.
To round it all out, right? So the investment strategy, the income strategy actually informs the investment strategy based on what the income plan says. That tells you what your investment strategy should be. Then we round it out with the tax strategy so that you're not overpaying in taxes. There's two different types of taxes out there. There's taxes you can't avoid, you're going to pay no matter what. And then there's taxes you can get out of legally by using strategies. Can we all agree that we should use whatever strategies are available to us to not pay voluntary taxes?
Heck yeah.
Don't pay any voluntary taxes. It's going to be hard enough. Then we want to make sure we're protecting you so you can stay at home. You don't want to go into Medicaid bankruptcy. You don't want a long-term illness to wipe out the life savings and leave your family and spouse maybe impoverished. And then we want to put together an estate and legacy plan so that we've wrapped it all up. You want to have a lifetime. You've built this estate, and now you want the people to get what you want them to get in the way you wanted to get it with the least amount of time, taxes, and hassle possible.
Isn't that what you want? A retirement freedom roadmap where it all fits together and you know that you get to keep more of your money in your pocket? Make the call right now for that retirement freedom roadmap. It is complimentary. A copy of the book that Rob has put together, Retire Free, is yours at 855-255-1128. Scan the QR code. Let's get you in the office to put together a map that works for you. Maybe some of this stuff is stuff you hadn't heard from anyone before. Maybe you have an advisor. Maybe you're doing it yourself. How about a second opinion? It costs you nothing. And doing nothing may cost you everything. Make a call, scan the QR code. Let's get in the office and put this together. We'll wrap this whole up when we come back.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
So glad you're with us. Final minutes of the Retirement Revolution. Brad Johansson with Rob Guy, Tax and Investment Advisors. Tax and Investment Advisors. You cannot get away from it. It is what you do. So I'm going to wrap it up. We'll throw up BostonTaxTest.com because we put that up on every show so that you can have an understanding of what you owe. You can go to the website, scan the QR code. You want to talk about zero tax plan.
Yes.
And yet none of us feel like we can get away from it. What's a zero tax plan?
Right. So a zero tax plan is something that is achievable if you're willing to put in the work. And it's not achievable for everybody. Some people's numbers just don't work. That's why we run the numbers. But let me tell you a little bit about what a zero tax plan is. What we like to do, we talked a little bit about the different tax buckets that money can be in, right? Yep. And we wanted to figure out how much money we want to have in those buckets for asset location. But there's another reason you want to figure out how much money to have in those buckets. We have something we call tax nirvana, okay? It's kind of a fun word.
I like the sound of that.
But it's called tax nirvana. Let's think about just our savings and safety account. How much money do you really want to have in there? Well, maybe 6 months or a year, right, of savings, just money you can put your hands on. We have different buckets for income, but that's our bucket that we have just as our cash reserve, let's say. And you don't want to have too much money in that account because it's generating taxable interest and it's not earning that much. But you need to have some in an emergency fund.
Yeah.
The next bucket is that tax deferred bucket. What we can do with people, if they're in the right situation, is we can do strategic Roth conversions to the point where we've reduced the amount of money in their tax deferred plan to the point where the distribution that's left is going to be offset by the standard deduction. Okay, so everybody gets a 30,000 standard deduction, or
Yeah.
So if I can get your RMD 30,000 or less, I've offset your entire RMD with your standard deduction. That's one. Now we're the assets that we have in taxable buckets. We have in tax-free municipal bonds. We have in tax-efficient index fund, different things like that, where we're keeping our actual taxes very low. Now, here's the thing. The money that goes in the Roth IRA, that comes out tax-free, okay? It has to meet certain requirements of being in there for a certain period of time and so forth, but that money can come out tax-free. So now I can build a life of income where I'm pulling a little bit out of my savings. The money I'm pulling out of my IRA is being offset by my standard deduction, and the money coming out of my Roth IRA is free. And I don't even have to take it out at 73 or 75. I can let it compound the rest of my life and let it compound for the children too. When this works, it is massively beneficial.
You have somebody that you know of that's in your office that is in tax nirvana?
Everybody we can get into it, we try to get into it or as close as we can. That's really the objective with everybody, is a zero tax retirement. Again, not everybody can get there, but it's well worth finding out if you can. And even if you can't get to zero, it's going to be a lot less tax than other people were paying. So that is the goal in retirement, is zero taxes. We try to get as close to that as we can. Some people may not be aware that, yeah, Social Security is taxable, but only to the extent that you have other taxable income that gets pulled into your income statement, onto your tax return. So if all you had was Social Security income and tax-free income from your Roth, you wouldn't pay tax on Social Security either. Okay, so there you go. You can avoid tax on Social Security. You can avoid tax on interest, dividends, and capital gains. If you have that set up, you offset your required minimum distribution taxes with your standard deduction. You have everything else in tax-free accounts. It's going to come to you tax-free. Bing, bang, boom.
How would you like to work towards tax nirvana? I mean, that's everyone's goal. BostonTaxTest.com, scan the QR code, and then you're going to want to make the call to 855-255-1128 so that you can have your complimentary retirement freedom roadmap. Let's get to nirvana. Let's make the retirement of your dreams all yours. Thanks for joining us here. Can't wait to see you in the office. See you right back here next time on the Retirement Revolution.